Hi, all of you love nerds. Thank you for listening to Love Dripping from the Walls. If you would like to support this podcast, I am looking for sponsors for the podcast. If you are a business owner, please reach out to me at lovedrippingfromthewalls@gmail.com. If you would like to support this podcast as an individual, please visit anchor.fm/love dripping from the walls. Thank you for listening. Keep listening and keep loving. All right, welcome to this week's episode of Love Dripping from the Walls with your host, that's me, Elizabeth Cunningham. Hello. And this week we have my very good friend Cordelia. What's up? So I have to give Cordelia a shout out before I properly introduce you, but I talk about Brandy a lot on the show, and Cordelia is the reason that I know Brandy, because Cordelia and Brandy are like BFFFFFs. And I met you first. And then that's how I met Brandy. So thanks for that.
You're welcome.
So a little bit of introduction for Cordelia. Cordelia is a longtime parkour practitioner with over a decade of experience under her belt, including coaching international parkour workshops and competing at international parkour and obstacle course competitions. Over the last decade, she has gone through quite a journey, including directing and producing plays, graduating film school, dabbling in movie stunts, overcoming an eating disorder, which we're actually going to talk a little bit about today, and later to become a health coach and living and traveling all over the world. And she now lives in Seattle with her husband, Christopher, who I also know and love, and her cat, Jane Snow.
I love my cat so much.
Who I call Lady Snow. And you are also the program director for Parkour Visions, which is the nonprofit parkour organization here in Seattle. So that's also an amazing thing that you do. Yay, yeah. So thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. Well, it was really funny because I had actually thought about having you on the show. Like, it was like, oh, I should talk to Cordelia about that. And then the other day it was, I'm going to have to, give credit to Brandy. Brandy was like, why don't you call Cordelia and have Cordelia be on the show? I was like,
yeah,
totally. So anything else that you want to add in your introduction there?
I think that's it. That's the stuff. That's me.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Yes. Well, again, thank you so much for being on the show. And I just love you to pieces. I think you're amazing. So hopefully once everybody's done listening to the show, they know how amazing you are. That's one of my goals.
Oh.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show was to talk about body acceptance. And that's something that you and I have talked about before. And one of the things that you've said to me that has really stuck out to me about body acceptance is you don't have to love your body. You actually said that to me, like blew my mind. I was like, what? Like, you don't, but aren't you supposed to? Isn't that what everybody says? Doesn't everybody say love your body? And you're like, yeah, you don't have, like, it's not required to love your body.
Totally. I mean, I think there's like multiple levels to it, right? Because it is like, you should love your body in the sense of, I don't know, the more umbrella term of the word love. But when I think of, I prefer the words like body acceptance over like love your body or what's the other one? Body positivity, just because like sometimes bodies are just fucking weird. Can I swear on this? I'm gonna swear on this.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes.
Okay, good. But
Yes, you can swear.
okay, good. But yeah, sometimes bodies are fucking weird, and you're gonna have body parts that like don't necessarily like look like these beautiful, sparkly rainbow and unicorn things. You know, like it's normal to have fat rolls. It's normal to have, you know, cellulite and like all kinds of stuff. Like freaking razor burn. Like that's just we're just a bunch of organs and skin, and I think it's really important to not associate a body with a picture. Like it is like this whole living organism, and to really appreciate your body for like all the other stuff that's happening in there, like your endocrine system and your immune system and all this like totally non-aesthetic things. And I think that's for me why I'm like, you don't have to like love how it looks at all. It just, you know, not that you should hate how it looks, but there should just be like, hey, this is my body. Like this is who I am, and just appreciate it for what it does for you, but it's not a picture.
Yeah, I really that wasn't something when you said it initially, because this was I don't even know when you said that to me, maybe even like a year ago. That was like a while ago that we had that conversation. But yeah, and it didn't occur to me to have that sort of neutral stance on my body, like just acknowledging what my body is. Like, oh, my hair is brown, my eyes are hazel,
Totally, yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like I have, you know, this is how my hands look, this is how my legs look, this is how my, you know, this is, you know, and just like this is how my teeth look. Like my teeth are something that I actually get a little self-conscious about sometimes, because I have like this crooked bit right here. But then it's
Which is such a cultural thing, by the way. Like
it is.
the other thing, it's so important to me that I always try to like tell people is like what thoughts are actually your thoughts versus thoughts you just like injected from culture into your brain, you know, like
Right.
you
Like you
don't
should
have
have
to
straight
be
teeth.
exactly like it's just teeth or teeth. Cool. Does it get in the way of like what you're doing in the day? Then sure, you could go get some work on it, but if it doesn't get in the way, then whatever, you know. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and
yeah.
it totally flips, and it makes that conversation available. You know, when you think about it in that neutral way, it makes that conversation available. I was sharing that with Brandy the other day. Is I think it was either like end of high school, but I think it was at the beginning of college, of me going to college, where I realized that one of the reasons why I was shaving my legs and like my armpits was just because that was something that I thought that you should do. You know,
Totally.
it's like it's totally a cultural thing in the United States, and generally in the Western world, where it's like, oh, women should have less hair on their bodies, and so you should shave off, you know, the hair on your body and stuff like that. And you know, in that, I was able to have that conversation in my head of, okay, is this something that I actually want to keep doing? Like I like
Sure.
recognizing that it's a cultural thing, but now it's like, okay, do I choose to keep doing it, or do I choose to not keep doing it? And I actually really love the feeling of shaved legs. I love, you know, I
Yeah.
love that. And so I was like, no, I'm going to actually choose to keep doing that because I really like it. Actually, just
Yeah.
I actually had a guy friend of mine who's like really like a typical, like stereotypical masculine dude who also shaves his legs. And he's like totally hetero, like completely 100%. And I was just like, why do you shave your legs? And he was like, why do you shave your legs? Because it feels good, right? That's why.
Good for him. That's awesome. Yeah, because it's just about the moment of choice, like it not having to be something that's forced on you. And I think because I never want to tell someone that they should or shouldn't look a certain way, that they should diet, that they shouldn't diet. Like obviously there's health professionals out there who will tell you what is healthy for your body and give you recommendations around that. But for me, I'm like, I just want people to have the space to choose, you know, like do you want to choose to lose weight, or do you want to choose to keep the weight that you are? Do you want to choose to even gain weight? Like I've gone on all those journeys, and you know, whether it's weight or like we talked about, like shaving your legs, like just that moment of choice is so powerful. And I think that really, when you do truly choose something, you don't struggle with it. You know, like
Right.
it's
Like it's
just
not a
easy.
conversation anymore. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
exactly. And when you choose it, then other people are free. Like there's you release judgment of other people as well. Like when you've
Yeah,
truly chosen it for yourself, I'm like, I could give two shits if other people shave their legs or not, you know?
totally.
Like
Yeah,
I'm just like, okay, good for you.
yeah. They choose that, I choose this. Good. Okay, great.
Yeah, rad. Um, so what has been your journey of body acceptance? Where would you say that
Massive.
started? Yeah, not like yeah, exactly. I mean, I could go all the way back to my childhood, right? But just like for you, kind of where did that start? What are some of the
Totally.
highlights of your body acceptance journey?
Yeah, I mean, actually, starting from childhood, when I was in elementary school, I went through a phase where I was like, I want to be a boy. And actually, I had a group of friends where one of my other best friend actually ended up transitioning into male. Um, so it was interesting for me that I was like, I don't know, like I went through this whole phase of experimenting with my gender, and then I was always very, very tomboyish, even though I like settled on being female. I never like fully went there, you know, but like I settled on being female, and I was just so tomboyish all the way up until I was 18. And in after high school, I went to film school and developed an eating disorder there. Got that whole anorexia, bulimia mix. Came back to Seattle. Uh, didn't have film, so I spent a lot of time, like there's not a film industry here in Seattle, and I didn't feel like moving to LA, and I also didn't have a Canadian citizenship because I went up to Vancouver, BC for my film school. And so I spent a lot of time like, I'm gonna try to be as thin as possible. Let me really work on my bulimia. Um, and yeah, yikes. Definitely was bulimic for a good number of years. I got a therapist eventually. I also found parkour at that same time. And for me, parkour has been both a blessing and a curse, depending on how I've used it with my eating disorder. Um, for instance, in a lot of ways, it really had me discover what it meant to love my body because I learned parkour at a time when I was like, because I was never physically active before
Really?
until I was like 18. Oh my god, I hated sports growing up. I hated them.
What?
Yeah,
That
hated it.
so surprises me about you. I did not know
I
this.
have a oh my god, I have a memory of like in first or second grade where I got hit on the head by a soccer ball
Mm.
and just was crying on the field. And I'm pretty sure in that moment I was like, I'm an artistic person. I'm never right. But
Of
yeah,
course.
so
I love
the
art.
only reason, right? I love art. Yeah. Went into theater, did that whole thing of designing sets, yada yada. Went to film school, yada yada. Only reason I got into athletics was literally because of my eating disorder. That was like, I'm gonna try all these classes. I'm gonna try getting a personal trainer and running and weight training. And I tried a circus class and a karate class, and I happened to try a parkour class. And I
Mm.
just like remembered all the smiling faces. Like there's such a need for community that happens in parkour specifically
Yeah, that was
that I
the
just
thing that really drew
yeah,
me in about parkour. That's what sold me on it was the community aspect of parkour. It's amazing.
it's such a great community. Yeah, so I just like it got me a space to also start to explore my body not having to be about how it looks and actually what it's capable of. So that was a really cool thing to discover as I healed from the eating disorder. But at the same time, something that I actually recently distinguished with another therapist who specializes in parkour was I basically took that eating disorder mentality into my parkour of like I have this goal to achieve and I'm going to work towards it, but I'm never good enough right here. And so it was a very up and down journey, and it showed up in a lot of like perfectionism with my sport. Like, if I don't, this is kind of how, when I'm in a perfectionist mindset, whether it's dieting or being an athlete, um, if I'm not doing things perfectly, I just give up. And that would show like, I'd show up and train something. I'd be like, I'm going to train my backflips today. And then I'm like, show up and go to the gym. And I'm like, oh, I can't do backflips today. screw everything, I'll try again next week, and just totally throw the eggs out with the basket or with the carton, whatever that saying is. Really bad with sayings. But yeah, so that's been a big thing. More recently, this is like over a decade long conversation, but more recently I decided to just really give up dieting. Like for a long time I was like, I still need to be thin to be a good athlete, so I'm still going to diet, and like had this whole up and down. I am going to diet. I'm not going to diet. And more recently was like, you know what? I really want my lifestyle to just be true to what my body is, and this was when I had just started becoming the program director for Parkour Visions. So I'd have been coaching for a long time, but like when you're coaching, you're way physically active. And when you're program director, you spend a lot of time on a laptop. And so I was just like, I'm just tired of doing things to change my body. Like I'm still very physically active. I love being athletic, but I'm going to let that dictate what my body looks like, not this whole like, oh my gosh, I need to work out 5 days a week in order to stay thin and keep my calories down and blah, 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 blah. So that's where that's been. Very recently, I actually have been the heaviest I've been over the last, like, until the last month or so. I haven't measured myself actually in a while, but the last time I measured myself, I was like 175, which would have been an explosion in my brain in previous years. And had like way more fat rolls and stuff, and like my belly is much larger and like blah blah blah. But that was so healing for me, just to be able to be like, what are you actually scared of? Are you actually scared of these fat rolls? No, like this is fine. You still have a husband who loves you very much. Like it's like this is totally just a made up conversation in your head. And oddly enough, I am actually dieting now just because to be honest, my boobs are too big and it hurts when I jump. And so I'm like, let's just stop.
Real thing.
Totally. Yeah. But I'm not like dieting now because I don't love my fat rolls. You know what I mean? It's like a much different, like it's a functional conversation. And,
totally. Well,
so that's,
and it's like that shift, right? And it's exactly, it kind of points to what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation, where it's when you accept where your body is just for what it is, and then you're able to have that choice. It's not like, oh, I'm dieting because I have to be skinny, or I have to do this, or I have to da 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 da. It's like, no, I'm dieting because I have this I have this goal, and I'm choosing to be this way for this goal, right?
Yeah.
I see like a larger vision, and this is what works inside of it. And it's not because there's a way that there's no like disempowering conversation around how your body needs to be.
Totally. Right?
And well, and also just thank you for sharing all of that. And one of the questions that came up for me in that was when you said your like eating disorder mentality. I think that a lot of people have questions like, why would you, because I've had eating disorders in different ways, but I've never been anorexic or bulimic. And so I think one of the questions that comes up is like, why would you do that? Why would you stop eating? Why would you, make yourself throw up? So can you talk a little bit more about that eating disorder mentality? Like what was there for you?
The first time, the first time I threw up in a toilet was I was in film school, and there was this guy who was really cute to me, and he didn't give me any attention at all. And in my brain, I don't, it wasn't like a conscious thought, but it was just like, I think it's because I'm too heavy and I need to be more girly. Cause that was the moment, like a lot of women, I think, start to deal with their sexuality and their gender in junior high and high school. I was like a late bloomer, and I was always like, no, I'm a tomboy. I don't really care about that. Jeans and a t-shirt kind of thing. Literally like short tomboy hair, like pixie cut, and no makeup. And and just like all of a sudden in film school, I was like, I like this guy and I think I'm not girly enough. And I had no idea in reality if that was actually anything to do in his brain. But
Sure.
for me, that was the decision I made, right? Like,
Yeah.
you need to be more girly. And I remember, oddly enough, I remember in high school when I saw like the health class video about like, look at how unhealthy it is to be bulimic and anorexic. And my thought when seeing that was like, that girl doesn't look that bad. She just looks like a thin model. And also like
Mm.
throwing up seems like an easy way to lose weight. And that's what I got out of health class. Which
Really good.
hopefully is not what most women get, but that's what I got out of it. Yeah. So, so that's
Yikes.
what propelled me to throw up in the first place. And it stayed a habit because it was so easy at first. And it starts being this really, really easy thing that you can just like, well, I'll just throw up after I eat, and totally a secret. No one notices. And then as you're doing that, you're getting compliments because people are telling you how thin you look, like, wow, you're looking thin, you look great. And over time, it just becomes like this secret that's just like hiding behind you. Like it becomes this addictive experience of, staying up late so you can like eat all the food in the kitchen, and literally like all the food. Like I just like scavenger hunt the whole kitchen and then feel immensely guilty for doing that because I was starving myself and I failed at starving. So now I have to go and purge. So it goes from this like seemingly not a big deal thing to like this big cycle of guilt, and then feeling good because I threw up, and then feeling good again. And it's just very cyclical, like the perfectionist mindset, actually.
Yeah. So that, okay. So thank you. So that kind of summarizes the like eating disorder mindset, right?
Yeah.
So then what did you have to do, or what happened so that you started to change that mindset? Is that something that's still with you and that you continuously have to deal with, or is it something that's like it's now in your past and you've totally dealt with it, and it's just something that was a part of your life in the past?
The conversation is definitely still there in my brain. Like, I don't know if it's possible in today's society to stop thinking about, as a woman, to stop thinking about your weight, honestly. I'm sure some people have achieved it, but I haven't. Like, it still
Right.
shows up every so often. But I've gone to therapy multiple times. I've had, sometimes it was like therapy specifically for eating disorder, and then more recently, like sports therapy. I've also obviously done the Landmark Forum. I've done, parkour was a huge, huge thing for me in terms of mindset and discovering that. I also another thing, speaking of eating disorders, I went through a period of time that was, I went from recovering from my eating disorder to becoming obsessive about health foods, which is a lesser known eating disorder called orthorexia. And it took me a long time to be willing to just acknowledge that I was orthorexic, like obsessed with perfectionism with eating foods. And then it would like ruin my day if I accidentally ate something, like had one cookie kind of stuff. But so yeah, lots of tools. I think for the most part, I don't know. It's not like there was like one thing. It was like there were lots of things that were really valuable at that time of my life. And it still becomes, I think it's very important to realize, like, I've gone off and on from dieting for so long. I think it's important to not get in the pitfall of identifying yourself as a certain way. Like, I am going to be plus size, and that's what I identify with, and I'm going to inspire people like that. No, I'm going to identify myself as someone who is a really thin athlete, and I inspire people like that. Like, it's just, you might be that at certain points, but your body is just this living, fluctuating thing. So you can't always be in control of how you influence people. I mean, I've spent a lot of time on Instagram as a athlete, so I speak from that that lens. But
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, I think.
Yeah, well, and that also leads to healthier conversations around, because that's one thing that I see, and this is something that I've dealt with personally and that I've studied for, years and years and years. And one of the things that I see is when you do place your identity in like, you know, oh, I'm really strong and sculpted, or I'm really thin
Totally.
and lean, or I'm plus size, and like you really hone in your whole identity on that. It's that when your body inevitably does change, because that's just what bodies do. Bodies change, you know. And so when your body inevitably does change, then it makes it harder to have that conversation, and it makes it easier for people to kind of bring in that criticism, right? Where it's
Yeah, like
like,
the expectation of this is what my normal is when it
right.
might not be. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Where it's just, you know, and we see that all the time, right? With like celebrities and stuff. It's like, oh, look at this celebrity at the beach. Looks like they've gained a little weight. They better work on that, you know, or like, you know, all of those
Totally.
conversations that we're just completely familiar with. But when we have a conversation about the expectations of bodies, that's the world that we're creating. And then if
Yeah.
we have this conversation of accepting bodies for the bodies that they are at the different stages that bodies go through, then, you know, then we have this more open-ended conversation to talk about, right?
Totally. Yeah.
And I think that, and I do think that it's gotten a little bit better in some aspects, right? Like one is like when women get pregnant, like it used to be like you have to hide yourself for 9 months, you know, when you get
Right.
pregnant. But now it's
Yeah.
like, oh, like pregnant bellies are like the thing or whatever, you know. So, and that has like its pros and cons as well. But I think that as we talk about it more, it has gotten better. But what what would I guess what would you I'm interested to know how, like, the advice that you would give someone
Mm.
like who might have an eating disorder, you know?
Yeah.
How
I
like
mean, eating disorder is hard because,
Mhm.
like, in general, I wouldn't say I'm qualified to coach someone with an eating disorder. Like that is something where I do think there's like little thoughts, obviously, I can relate to,
Mhm.
but like I'm not like you know, like I would definitely point them towards like a health professional who's specific around that, who spent,
Right.
you know, like their college to learn how to work towards that specifically. um,
Right.
yeah. Yeah. So I try to coach people who, I mean, I have coached people in the past who've had eating disorders, but it's generally the people who like they've gone to a therapist before, or like they're with a therapist. But usually it's mostly women. There's just so many women. I don't know. It's also hard because there's like eating disorder with capitalized letters versus like the statistic 1 out of 3 women has body image issues. So it's like
Hmm.
most women, you know, I think that's also really important to recognize. That's actually something I would talk to someone about, is like, do you think you're the only one? You know, like we're really not alone in this, and it feels like you're very much alone. But it I really come from just like what are their goals is almost always the first thing, and I never make their goals wrong. You know, it's never like, you want to lose weight, how dare you, you know, like it's like, yeah, you can totally lose weight, but like, let's look at your why. And I remember I had one client who was like, it feels like you're kind of like picking at my goals, and I was like, I am. Like I want to like dig under there and figure out what's underneath there, and go from there. And it's, for me, it's a lot of listening. It's a lot of questions. And like I have one client recently who, um, she talked about, I think I asked her a question like, if you were already at where you wanted to be, what would you be doing that you're not doing now? And she was like, I'd be filming videos. And I was like, cool. Cause she has this whole, like, when I look at myself in a video doing parkour, it's just, she doesn't like it. Right. Which I get. I literally, when I first started learning backflips, my husband at the time, he was training me, and he was like, you need to film yourself so you can see your flip technique. And I was like, I literally can't. You can film me and you can watch my technique, but I won't. And that's actually how I started my Instagram, was to get over that and start posting more.
Oh wow.
But as a side note, social media, I'm probably one of the few people that fucking love social media and don't think it's evil. I think it's an amazing communication tool. I think exactly what you talked about. I'm totally going a small tangent, but we
Totally.
talked about before, of like there's more open conversations. I think a lot of that has to do with the power of media being put in more people's hands. Like anyone has a camera now where they can go and film themselves or take pictures of themselves and
Mm-hmm.
start a dialogue, versus it used to be like the Hollywood stars, who are filmed by film people. And now
Yeah.
it's like you have any conversation you want on the internet, which is for good or for bad. Yeah.
Well, I think that it just highlights, everything done by humans highlights humanity, right?
Yeah,
Where it's just,
exactly.
that's
Yeah.
said simply. Said simply, everything done by humans highlights humanity. And so if you have a platform used by a broad range of humans, then people are going to use it as intended. People are going to use it for good, bad, and ugly,
Yeah.
and so I think I'm also on board with you where I don't think that social media is inherently evil, just because it's not a thing that can be good or bad. It's just a tool. It's like,
Totally.
saying that a hammer is evil if someone uses it violently. It's like the hammer isn't evil. The person using the hammer is not a good person,
Yeah.
or needs help or whatever. But it's not the hammer's fault, just like it's not social media's fault that bad shit happens. People do bad shit, you know, and then
Totally.
and then we have to deal with the consequences of that as a society. And
Yeah.
so anyway, so yeah, good tangent.
it also reminds me of like for a long time I was using Instagram as a way to have a shared conversation about like body and athletic acceptance. Like a big thing was just discovering like, I can actually put up imperfect clips that don't look like all these stylized perfect clips that the professionals put up, and the amount of appreciation I get in return of people being like, oh, like either it's cheering on or being like, oh my gosh, I also struggle with that. Like just being able to be supported for your imperfections, I think was a huge lesson I learned. But after a period of time, it actually started turning into like, I felt like I had to talk about those kind of things, like that's how I identified myself as, and like it almost became this like attention grab. And so I'm also looking at like, how do I ensure I'm having a conversation and not like just pointing a camera at myself, I think is always a really important balance with social media, like because it can be really easy just to word vomit onto a page and
Sure.
take a picture of yourself and feel good internally, but not actually be in a conversation with anyone. And that's something I think, I don't know, in-person conversations or Zoom conversations are so important to actually engage with another human being around what you're up to. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of that has to do with intentionality,
Yeah.
like having that intention and really seeing that intention come through. And of course, like we just said, people are going to interpret things differently. So maybe, your intention won't come across, but it's always a learning tool, right? But I think
Totally.
that having that intention, right? Like what am I intending to put out there? And you're absolutely a person who is about, teaching, coaching, having people be better, exploring possibilities, expanding what's possible for humans. Like that is, your intention in the world generally. And I'm just going to speak for you on that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. But it is like you're a teacher, you want people to be better. You want people to learn. You want people to break those unhealthy habits that they have.
Totally.
And so, and I think so. Going back to what you were saying, where it's like, okay, are you posting something just because you're forwarding a conversation, or are you posting something for your own ego or or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that either one is like bad or necessarily.
Yeah, it's like having a balance, I would say, because you do deserve to celebrate yourself and just be vocal about your thoughts at the same time. Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to always be, furthering humanity or anything like that.
What?
Yeah.
You're not furthering humanity with every single syllable that comes out of your mouth?
I'm perfect.
You're not the person I thought you were.
Balance, though. Hashtag balance.
Hashtag balance. Well, and that actually brings a really great point, because I think that everything does have that balance. And so bringing it back to body acceptance, swinging it back to body acceptance, because what is the balance in body acceptance? What would you say?
Well, having spent a lot of time balancing on rails, I can tell you I can tell you, it's not like you like ever achieve this perfect balance. It's always this like swaying back and forth game, and then there's some times where you fall off the rail and literally have to get all the way back up on the rail, and so over time you do get better at being closer to the middle, but to be able to achieve perfection is just not possible in balance. And I think that's a pretty adequate analogy for life. Like, you're gonna have times where you totally fall off the wagon. You're gonna have times where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so close to exactly where I want to be. That's amazing. And then there's also like this kind of tick-tock motion that happens, that is literally what balance is. For, if anyone is not familiar with that, just go like balance on one foot with your eyes closed for a second, and just see where you naturally end up. My inner movement coach coming out. I'm like, this movement, I know. Yeah.
I love it. Go try to balance on a rail and figure out life's questions.
Yeah, and it's the same thing too, I think, with dieting. Like, my current client does want to lose weight, and that's fine, but it's like recognizing where you're at in terms of the balance. Like, when you do diet, it's very normal to like completely fall off. In the same way, when you're first learning how to balance on a rail, you're going to completely fall off, and why you should learn how to fall. Which I guess in this analogy, the learning how to fall safely in parkour is the equivalent of like not beating yourself up. Like, just being like, oh, you know what? I did have a whole box of Oreo cookies today with milk, and that was amazing and delicious. And I'm not going to like, one, I'm not going to make myself wrong, but two, I'm not going to like obsess over it. I think that's a big thing that people get stuck on, is like, and it goes back to the whole idea of body acceptance. It's just like not fixating on things that actually are out of your control. Like, sure, you maybe could have chosen to not have that box of Oreo cookies before you did it, but now you're here. So, okay, that's fine. Just don't fixate on it, like in the same way of, you don't need to fixate on if you love your body or not, unless you want to. If you want to go be a model, then totally go do that too, but it's that choice, right?
Yeah, choice and balance.
Yeah, hashtag choice, hashtag balance.
Put all the hashtags in the show notes. No, that's a great analogy of balance with the not beating yourself up, right? Like, so not seeing it as failure. A conversation that I had last week was about not having a right way that it has to be. Like, giving up the idea that there is a right way. Like, there's a right way that your body should look. There's a right way that you should feel about your body. There's a right way to eat. There's a right weight. There's a right, like, there's all these, and which builds those expectations, and also builds that, when you fall off, that you beat yourself up, because there's a right way to be, and totally know that you didn't do it the right way, right? But then, right?
Yeah, so relate. To specifically speak to that, what it reminds me of is actually when I worked with the parkour therapist. By the way, her name is Kasturi, and she does a Spirit Concrete in London. She's amazing. But she's like the only person in the world who's got like she puts her therapy PhD directly into parkour athletes, and it's so great. But she really got to deep dive with me about like how much I make feeling tired wrong. And that's a way for me, like if I like human bodies feel fucking tired sometimes, and I would go and be like, I'm gonna work on X, Y, and Z skills today, and then I would show up and I was like, oh wow, I really feel tired. I'm not gonna train today. Like this is not a perfect day, and I would shut down everything. And she had me just look at like, well, here you are now. You're tired. Like, what can you do? You know, can you either do like less repetitions of those skills you want to work on? Can you play a little bit, but like still doing something that's in balance with what you're up to, as opposed to, it's in, yeah, like just like molded together with what you're up to, as opposed to shutting it down entirely. And I think that's the biggest problem, is when you make something wrong, you just shut it down and you kill it off, and then you're killing off the thing that you said you cared about, in any area of life.
Mm-hmm.
And that sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also retraining your brain to be creative, right? That's what I
Yeah.
hear in that too, is that, giving yourself different, when something's not right or wrong, but you can actually just play with how it is, play with how your body feels today, just like really recognize and notice, this is how my body feels today. These are the emotions that I have. These are the thoughts that I'm having. These are the body sensations that I'm having. And instead of using that as an excuse to, yeah, to like shut it all down or like whatever, but just being like, okay, well, what can I do inside of that? Or, one of the Brendan Burchard is like a really amazing high performance life coach. I'll put the woman that you just mentioned in the show notes, and I'm going to put Brendan Burchard in the show notes as well, because one of the things that he talks about is energy, and talking about like your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual energy, and being able to generate the emotions or feelings that you want, like recognizing like, oh, I might be feeling really tired right now, but like, how do I want to be feeling? And then be able to generate that feeling, not to like negate that feeling of tiredness. Like you shouldn't, I'm not advocating for someone to like wear themselves out, like just by ignoring their feeling of being tired, but just like being able to be like, okay, I'm feeling tired right now, but what feelings do I want to generate inside of my practice today, or inside of my training today? Like I really want to be enthusiastic. So it's like, okay, yeah, maybe you do less things because you are dealing with the fact that yes, your body is physically more tired today than maybe it has been in the past, but that you can do those things and still be enthusiastic about it.